Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about David Guterson's 1994 novel, Snow Falling on Cedars. I actually found that I'd never heard of it before. I found this book while I was moving through a bookstore in Charleston, South Carolina, and just the cover kind of caught my eye, along with the title. The title is very evocative, Snow Falling on Cedars. I just caught my eye, and so I picked it up, not really knowing what it was about, and I finished it last week, and I really enjoyed it. Basically, this novel takes place in the Pacific Northwest in Puget Sound, on a fictional island called San Pedro. It's set in the 1950s, and it's following the course of a murder trial. The accused man is a Japanese American by the name of Kabuo Miyamoto, and he's accused of murdering a fisherman named Karl Heine. So Karl Heine is found dead, tangled up in his fishing boat net early in the morning. After a night of fishing, and they take him to a coroner, and they discover that there is a wound to his head and skull. And Kabuo, was skilled in kendo stick fighting, it's a Japanese form of martial arts using kind of a short stick like a baton. And he practiced this when he served for America during World War II. And so they believe that Miyamoto was the murderer, and they arrest him after finding some evidence on his boat. The book is really dealing with prejudice against Japanese Americans during this time period. So it's taking place, of course, 10 years after World War II. But these memories are still very prevalent in the minds of the citizens of the island. So the whole story, most of the story is told through flashbacks, going back to many of the characters' births, their early childhoods, their lives growing up, their lives during World War II, and then leading up to the actual death of Karl Heine. And one of the big driving factors for the prosecution is this land deal that went sour. So San Pedro Island, it's one of its biggest industries besides fishing was strawberry farming. And Heine's family owned a strawberry farm, and Kabuo Miyamoto's family were strawberry pickers on the farm occasionally. And Kabuo's father finally raised up enough money to put down a down payment and try to buy some of the land. And Karl Heine's father was like, yeah, absolutely. So he sold 7 acres to him, and they had a series of payments they had to keep up with. They were keeping up with their payments just fine up until the very last payment, which they couldn't make because the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred, and the island's Japanese American citizens were taken to internment camps. So Miyamoto's family missed their final payment, and Karl's father actually wanted to honor the deal and let them pay when they got back, but he died of a heart attack later on, and Etta Heine, who was Karl's mom, she really disliked Miyamoto's family. She had strong racial prejudices towards the Japanese Americans, and so she ends up selling the entire farm out from under them. So they lose their 7 acres, they lose their homes, and when they come back, they feel as if they've been cheated out of their land, which they really had. So the prosecution's entire case kind of rests on this land deal that went sour, and they're trying to say that Miyamoto murdered Karl Heine as kind of vindication, revenge for the stolen land, because Karl Heine ends up buying the farm from the people that his mother had sold it to. So there's some major prejudice going on there. At the same time, there's another plot where the island's reporter, person who runs the newspaper by the name of Ishmael, a huge reference to Moby Dick, of course. Ishmael, his entire life, well, not his entire life, but his childhood, his early tween years, his teenage years, he is in a secret relationship with a Japanese-American girl named Hatsue. And of course, they're not allowed to disclose this relationship because of the prejudices towards the Japanese Americans, and this interracial relationship would not have been approved of during that time. So Ishmael's in the secret relationship with Hatsue. Hatsue's in the secret relationship with Ishmael. Neither of them can tell their parents. Their friends can't know. But it's very passionate. You can tell that there's a lot of care that each has for each other. But they are, especially Hatsue, is disturbed by the fact that she's being deceitful. Ishmael and Hatsue have a hollowed out cedar tree in the woods that they meet in, that they will sit together inside of and talk with each other. And eventually, the day before Hatsue's family is due to be taken away to the internment camps, Ishmael kind of proclaims his love to her and how he wants to be with her forever. And they start to have sex, but Hatsue is very uncomfortable with this, and she pushes him away, and is basically like, this can't work. This is never going to work. And so she leaves. And she ends up, of course, is taken away to the internment camp. And Ishmael is left very heartbroken. He's never quite the same. He ends up going to fight in World War II as well. He ends up on the Pacific Front, and he's one of the first waves in the Battle of Tarawa. And he watches many of his fellow soldiers die. And for a while, he becomes bitterly hateful towards Hatsue, and pretty racist towards the Japanese. I think he's conflating his anger at not being able to be with her, and then watching all of these people die together, and it kind of compounds. And when he comes back from the war, he lost his arm. When he comes back from the war, he is just broken, twisted. He's not even hateful when he comes back. He's just empty. There's nothing left there. So, all these people on San Pedro, they're haunted. They're haunted by memories. They're haunted by what happened to the Japanese American people. They're haunted by loss of their land, and by family issues, and all of these things. And the book itself is very, very atmospheric. Of course, it's set in the Pacific Northwest on this small island. It's foggy. It rains all the time. There's these vast cedar forests. And the trial is taking place during the middle of a snowstorm. So you're getting all of this information about these family feuds and this prejudice and this potential murder, with the backdrop of this snowstorm raging outside, and it's windy outside, and you can hear the howling winds, and it's cold, and steam from the radiators is filling up the room, and the jurors have to go back to a hotel and sleep in that doesn't have power, and they're freezing cold. So the novel is deeply atmospheric. It is very, very wonderful to read from that. It really, puts you in the mindset of being there in the Pacific Northwest. Let me read a passage that I felt really demonstrated that. There were straight rows of trees, colonnades, growing out of the seed bed of trees that had fallen 200 years before and sunk and become the earth itself. The forest floor was a map of fallen trees that had lived 500 years before collapsing. A rise here, a dip there, a mound or moldering hillock somewhere. The woods held the bones of trees so old no one living had ever seen them. Hatsue had counted the rings of fallen trees more than 600 years old. She had seen the deer mouse, the creeping vole, the green-hued antlers of the white-tailed deer decaying underneath a cedar. She knew where lady fern grew, and phantom orchids, and warded giant puffballs. Deep among the trees she lay on a fallen log and gazed far up branchless trunks. A late winter wind blew the tops around, inducing in her a momentary vertigo. She admired a Douglas fir's complicated bark, followed its grooves to the canopy of branches 200 feet above. The world was incomprehensibly intricate, and yet this forest made a simple sense in her heart that she felt nowhere else. So you're really given this sense of deep atmosphere when you're reading this book. I should have mentioned, I forgot to mention this earlier, but when Hatsue goes away to the internment camp, she ends up marrying Kabuo, who then just a couple weeks later enlists in the military and fights in Germany. And so Ishmael has this kind of sense of this feeling that Kabuo stole Ishmael away from her, so he is slightly bitter towards him during the trial. And Kabuo himself is a very interesting character. You're given these descriptions of him throughout the trial where he's sitting upright with a stone face. Here we have the accused man, Kabuo Miyamoto, sat proudly upright with a rigid grace, his palms placed softly on the defendant's table, the posture of a man who has detached himself insofar as this is possible at his own trial. And you know, you'll hear the jurors and the people in the courtroom think that because he's not reacting to any of the information, he's guilty. And of course, this is a very Japanese culture thing where you have this pride, you're very proud, and you're not going to let things affect you. But Kabuo also, at the same time, he feels as if this trial and him being accused of the death of Karl Hein is karma. He feels that him being accused of the death of Karl Hein is karma for him killing Germans during World War II. Karl Hein is of German descent. So there's this sense that that Kabuo feels like what is happening is karma being dealt to him. A lot of you get some scenes that are on the ocean while characters are fishing on their fishing boats, and they're quite beautiful. I always have this this feeling just that living in the Pacific Northwest, working on a fishing boat, obviously would be hard, but it's such a atmospheric way of life. I keep using that word, atmospheric, but it's it's romantic, right? The image of it is desirable. And here we have Kabuo fishing for salmon, and I just loved this description. In the silence, he sipped tea and waited for the salmon. As on other nights, he imagined them in motion, swift in pursuit of the waters they'd sprung from, waters that held both past and future for them, their children and their children's children and their deaths. When he picked his net and held them pinched at the gills, he felt in their silence how desperate their sojourn was. And he was moved in the manner a fisherman is moved, quietly, without words. Their rich silver flanks would feed his dreams, and for this he was thankful and sorrowful. There was nothing tragic in the wall of invisible mesh he'd hung to choke the life from them while they traveled to the rhythm of an urging they could not deny. He imagined them slamming against his net in astonishment at this invisible thing that finished their lives in the last days of an urgent journey. Sometimes, hauling net, he came across a fish thrashing hard enough to elicit a cracking thump when it banged off the islander's transom. Like all the others, it went into the hold to die over the course of hours. And I also think that description is is almost a microcosm of the themes of the book itself, of life moving on. There are things that you cannot control. Here, just a few pages later, almost towards the end of the book, we have Ishmael reflecting. The silence of the world roared steadily in his ears while he came to recognize that he did not belong here. He had no place in the tree any longer. Some much younger people should find this tree, hold to it tightly as their deepest secret, as he and Hatsue had. For them, it might starve off what he could not help but see with clarity, that the world was silent and cold and bare, and that in this lay its terrible beauty. And that last part, that the world was silent and cold and bare, and that in this lay its terrible beauty, I underlined because I really feel like that is what Guterson is trying to drive at with this book, that no matter what you do, no matter how you live your life, life is going to happen, and things are going to move, things are going to occur that you have no control over, and you just got to take what life gives you. So yeah, that's my discussion of Snow Falling on Cedars. I really loved this book. It's not perfect, but it was I think the kind of book I needed at this time. I was having trouble, sticking with anything, but this one really pulled me in, especially after the first 100 or so pages. It becomes very, very emotional, and you really get to know these characters. So I would definitely recommend it. It's also, I think, more or less the perfect length for a novel, right around 450 pages. So, you have time to fall into this world, to understand the characters and the things that are happening, but it's not too long to where things are starting to lose you. So, yeah, Snow Falling on Cedars. Thank you for watching. Please, if you have any book recommendations, give me a comment, like, subscribe. I look forward to hearing from y'all. Bye-bye.